right? Like I remember I was helping one of my friends try to launch their own coaching business. And it took more than 6 months for me to be able to convince them, you should just do it, right? And then once they did it, they were like, oh my God, this is so easy. I didn't realize how easy it was. I'm like, yeah, I told you it was really
I'm
easy.
thinking this should be like a 101 for anybody who wants to start a coaching business. So could you walk us through all of the different steps you take and how do you scale from there?
You yourself, the coach, are part of the product package, right, that you're offering to people. It's like specifically being able to resonate with you. And so I think one of the things that generally doesn't go well is when someone's like, hey, the only way that you can work with me is to pay up front.
How is AI changing this whole product coaching?
So like AI is incredible for coaches to be able to prepare for upcoming sessions because you can actually go work through all of that. It's also incredibly helpful for you to be able to target your expertise.
How would the business model work like, and what do you expect? Could you expect on the revenues, and what are the different types of revenue streams you can have, if you can share that information? Hello everybody, welcome to our podcast Everything Product. So we talk about latest technology and product management concepts here. So we are super excited today to welcome Clement Kao, the founder and CEO of Product Teacher. So he's personally coached over 7,000 product managers from Fortune 500 companies to fast-growing startups. So Clement, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you give us a very quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. So yeah, again, I'm Clement. My mission is to make product management easier for everyone. I had a very difficult time when I first broke into product management, which is why I spent a lot of time writing about product, talking about product, teaching about product. So that's why I decided to, launch my own PM coaching business. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Clement. So making it easy, making product management easier. Yeah. So I know, a lot of product managers who have been in product management field for a while plan to start, kind of a coaching business or want to get into mentoring others and all of that stuff. So we'll get into details of that later in the podcast. But let's maybe start with your story of Product Teacher, right? How did you start Product Teacher? What prompted you to start Product Teacher?
Yeah, fantastic question. So actually, the funny thing is I was not originally planning on doing coaching. That was not the thing I was planning on doing. I was originally just, doing my own job as a product manager. But one of the things that kept happening is like people kept trying to find me to like get on calls or let's like talk about like, hey, Clement, how did you break in? How did you tackle this problem, et cetera, et cetera. And I was doing all of this stuff kind of over the nights, in the early mornings, on weekends. And I thought, well, hey, if I'm already able to help all these people, what if I made it my full-time career instead? But I decided not to kind of like jump all the way in head first because like, that carries some amount of risk. And so it's, hey, like, let's do basically like a pilot, the way that you might do any sort of prototyping for your own product. I said, okay, here are like the weekends where now I'm actually carving out, hey, like this is like paid product coaching, et cetera, et cetera. Are people willing to pay these price points? Does this service make sense? Does this bundle make sense? Does this marketing positioning make sense? And that was all really helpful to do kind of while I was still serving as a full-time product manager at Movoto and while still serving as a full-time product manager at Blend. And so because I was able to prove out the viability of, hey, this actually is something that I could see myself doing full-time, that's why I decided to, hey, I'm going to turn in my notice to step away from Blend. I actually gave them like 3 months, or it wasn't a 2-week notice. Like, hey, I really want to make sure that's like a very smooth transition out while I continue to build up, that base, while I continue to build up my best practices of, hey, here's how I'm going to code people. And so the way that I would say kind of Product Teacher began was there was so much demand for my help and my expertise while I was working just as a PM that, hey, there might be something here in terms of me being able to fulfill more of this demand. Let's go ahead and turn to like a full-time career and see what that actually does. So that's really why Product Teacher started. It was, I noticed that for a lot of my counterparts that I worked with back when I was at Blend. So, hey, I would be coaching all of these people for free or, within, Wells Fargo, US Bank, a lot of these financial institutions, they didn't really have a great grasp of product management. Whereas like, hey, look, we're going to just do all of these like ticket breakdowns. We're not actually going to think about customer interview. We're not thinking about solving the problem. And so I said, hey, like there is some space here. Let me go ahead and jump into this. So then that way we can really create a lot more value. And so, yeah, so that's really how Product Teacher got started. It was based off of just, 5 or so years of informally mentoring people. And I was just like, hey, I probably should actually go do this one.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for walking us through that journey, Clement. As this evolved, right? Like, what were the big surprises, that you saw when building a business like this?
Yeah, big surprises. Really great question. So I think one of the things that I was really surprised about, and I think one of the things that actually people freak out a lot about that they shouldn't, is actually just like incorporating a business. I think a lot of people think like, oh my gosh, like I have never started a business before. This is going to be so difficult. I was surprised by how easy it was, right? Like basically there are all of these, online SaaS startups, honestly, right? Where it's like, hey, like you can go like incorporate a business for quite easily. Like, yes, it does cost some amount of money, but it actually isn't all that difficult, right? Like, in terms of, oh, my bylaws, my articles, or whatever, all that paperwork is actually quite straightforward. I think so. So there's one part there. I think another thing that people also are like, hey, coaching is like a thing where you have to have like these like different packages, or like you have to have all of these like whatever. Like it's also not quite that complicated. It's, hey, if someone is really looking for your time and you know the value of your time and say, hey, my time is worth this much. If you'd like to talk to me, here's how much it is. If you would prefer not to, like that's totally okay. That is just like a business, right? Like I've had people like literally come to me and say, hey, Clement, how much can I pay you just so that like now I can start talking to you, because clearly you're busy and clearly like we've been going back and forth over emails. I want to just talk to you a lot. And so I think the biggest surprises were just like how willing people were to pay for coaching. Of like, hey, I've been stuck in my career. I really want to talk to you live, Clement. Like, I don't want to just be reading your blog. I don't want to just be like hearing you over email. I want to talk to you in person. And then also just like getting a business started is actually way easier than I think a lot of people think it. I think the thing that is a lot more difficult is once you have a business, right? How do you kind of like grow it? How do you make sure that people continue to find value in what you're doing, etc.? I think that's probably the more complicated part. But in terms of getting started, I think people overreact. So I think that's the place where I honestly think, that a lot of product managers would honestly do really well serving as like mentors to other PMs, actually go and coach, because like there's all this really amazing knowledge to have. But they're too scared about the initial starting barriers. It's like, hey, I need to go create a company, right? Like I remember I was helping one of my friends try to launch their own coaching business. And it took more than 6 months for me to be able to convince them, you should just do it, right? And then once they did it, they're like, oh my God, this is so easy. I didn't realize how easy it was. I'm like, yeah, I told you it was really easy, right? Like, hey, I'm really worried about like getting my first customer. And it's like, they got their first customer like 2 days after they incorporated. It was like super fast, right? And so I think there's so much pent up demand for people to have PM coaches, and there's so little supply that like, I think a lot of people should seriously consider, hey, instead of me fighting so hard to try to get promoted on the job, right? What if I took some of that energy and I started to coach other people instead, right? Because when you think about it, but you're promoted on the job to like, let's say like director of product. Like, what do you do? You're coaching people, right? And like, but you have to wait for the promotion. Like you have to wait to then be like, hey, like I'm in charge of these 2 people careers or whatever. But if you just coach people, right? Like you can coach like 10 people instead of like managing only 2 people on the job. You don't have to wait for that, title change. You don't have to wait for that, compensation boost. You can just do it whenever. And then the market decides how much you're worth, right? Like you're not kind of sitting there trying to figure out like corporate politics of am I going to get promoted? This is like when people want to talk to you, they'll talk to you. If they don't want to talk to you, you can iterate very quickly off of that. Right? So I think that's why I think a lot of people, it's like, hey, Clement, I really want to get promoted. I'm like, why? So that I can like teach other PMs. I'm like, okay. And let's say, and then so I can get paid more. I'm like, okay. Have you considered coach? I'm like, oh, you can do that? I'm like, yeah. So I think it's like very interesting to like try to shape the way that people think about things, and instead of trying to rise forward. Sometimes what actually makes the most sense is to come out and teach others. So that's why I'm speaking about this topic on this podcast. So I think it's a very underrated career path that people are curious about, but they think starting the business and like incorporating it is like super difficult. It's not. And getting your first customer is also not that hard.
Awesome. So that's a very interesting take. So you're saying that, for you to kind of go through the corporate ladder and wait to coach someone, you can actually start a business, and there's enough demand for people to come to you, and you can actually start earning also. So this could be a very viable path for you to have it as a side gig, right?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Also, I want to double click on some of the coaching stuff that you do, Clement. Like, what is that you offer as a product coach to aspiring product managers or any IC product manager?
Yeah, totally. So the thing that I think so different people have different styles, and so ultimately it just depends on how you as a product coach or you as like a product mentor think about what is my value proposition, like what's the way that I'd like to teach or like. And so some people really like to tell stories about, hey, like here's something that I did. Other people prefer to be a lot more reactive of, hey, you bring me a problem on the spot, I'm gonna like solve the problem on the spot for you. And there's like really depends in terms of like what people want. So there are definitely folks who are like really focused on, hey, like I'm gonna help you with the PM interview process. Or like after you come to me for like, let's say 6 sessions specifically, then you're gonna be ready to like do like interviews. Other people, more like me, are a lot more like just in time. And so it's like, hey, now that you have an interview scheduled, let's just prepare for that upcoming interview. Make sure that you understand how to crush that one, rather than trying to like teach all of these different things and then hope that it sticks when you get an interview like 12 months later. And so kind of for me, the way that I see the value that I bring to my client is when something comes up, whether it's, hey, like there's some massive escalation or massive problem at work, or whether it's, hey, I just suddenly got an energy, right? Like that just in time ability to solve that right there, I think is something that people really value. I think the other thing that people really value is being able to hear me talk through, hey, here's a general principled approach for like how you would solve problems like this. But then let me tell you how I did and where I broke my own rules. And I think like that pairing together is something that I bring that I've noticed that a lot of coaches may not bring. So many times a product coach, they might do one of the two. They might either give you, hey, here's the framework, but they don't tell you how they use the framework. Or they'll say, hey, here's how I solved a problem, but they don't tell you how to abstract it to your situation. And so I want to be able to bridge both of, hey, here's the overarching way in which you would tackle this, but then let's actually see it in practice. Now let's talk about your situation. What if I were in your shoes? What would I do? Where would I break the rules and where would I not break the rules? And so then being able to see all of that live, I think is incredibly valuable for the people that actually.
And what do you like if people go to your website, right? So what are the things which you normally offer now?
Yeah, great question. So the things that people typically come to me for are, hey, I want to figure out how to get, I want to figure out how to strengthen my skills on the job. Whereas basically, I'm already working as a product manager. I feel like I don't know how to get to the next level of seniority. Clement, like help to accelerate me, right? So then bring all of your years of experience in, rather than me just use my immediate experience. So that's the most popular. The second most popular one is, hey, I have never done product management before, and I want to become a product manager. I'm willing to pay a lot just in terms of not having to spend a bunch of time doing mock interviews with people who don't know what the interview process looks like, talking to people who have never actually seen the PM resume from a hiring manager perspective. But like, I want to talk to someone who's done it all, seen it all, and can save me a lot of time. And so they're basically trading time for money, right? Hey, instead of me needing to spend 12 months to 36 months trying to find my next PM job, let me work with you. So then that way I'm getting interviews in the next 2 to 3 months. That way, like when I'm in the interview process, my likelihood of getting an offer jumps up to more like 60 to 70% rather than like the typical like 10 to 20%, because that is like significantly more, it's a lot better use of their time, right? Because maybe they are trying to set up family, maybe they are trying to move from one country to another, right? So that's typically the two that people come to me with is, hey, I'm really trying to get to the next level, or I'm currently trying to find a pivot from something that's not product management, like let's say management consulting, or like venture capital, and break into product management. So that's what I've generally seen as the most popular demands of life.
Yeah, so one of the things that we often struggle, I mean, myself included, like early in the career is you can go to a certain extent, be an IC product manager to go to that next level. You're just not a product manager, but you also need to be a good coach. So you can manage other product managers, which is, I feel like that's where a lot of PMs get stuck, moving into that, the coach or the manager level thing.
Awesome. So Clement, let's get into the meat of the podcast here. So I know that let me maybe start with one persona, right? So I've been a product manager for a while, and I have gained enough experience, and now I want to share my experience to others who are maybe aspiring product managers, or product managers who have been in their early career, right? So how do I start coaching business, right? How do I get into that, right? Could you I'm thinking this should be like a 101 for anybody who wants to start a coaching business. So could you walk us through all of the different steps you take, and how do you scale from there?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the very first thing, right, is knowing how to give people like basically like a free sample. Like, and what I mean by that is like it's kind of like going to therapy, right? Like if anyone who you're working with, like you're putting all of this trust into them, you're sharing a lot of very deep-seated things about yourself, right? Like what are my ambitions, what are my fears, what are my concerns, and so like you need to like be able to bond well with that person. Like you yourself, the coach, are part of the product package, right, that you're offering to people. It's like specifically being able to resonate with you. And so I think one of the things that generally doesn't go well is when someone's like, hey, the only way that you can work with me is to pay up front. Most people are going to say, nope, I don't want to do it, right? Because like they can't really like understand what it's going to be like. And so a couple of ways in which you can help people to understand what it's going to be like is you can pull together like, hey, here is a case study of like someone that I work with, or like, hey, like here's my general approach to whatever I'm doing, etc. A lot of times you can do like, hey, like here's like a free 30-minute consultation. Like let's walk through the problem. Let me give you like how I would tackle this problem. And if you're interested, let's go for like an actual paid one. And so I think that really helps. Whereas I see too frequently people say, no, like you need to pay me first before like I'm willing to talk to you. Most people are just gonna say no, like that's too expensive. I'd say like that's probably one of the more important things of just like being able to give someone this like almost like free trial perspective. But another thing is like making it really clear what you will do and what you will not do. So one of the things that people say is like, hey, Clement, I want you to rewrite my resume for me. And I'm like, I do not do that. And why do I not do that? The reason why I don't do that is because only you yourself understand what you did at work. Like, I'm not going to say things that like are not your actual accomplishments. And so only you know those accomplishments. What I can do is I can guide you through it. I can say, hey, here's why you need to talk more about metrics here. Here's why you need to talk more about the problem solved here. Like, here's why like these different things are not resonating when you're applying. But I'm not going to do it for you because I can't possibly speak to the other experiences that you haven't considered. So as an example, someone might be like, oh, I'm currently a college graduating student. And, here is my resume. And like they only talk about like the product management stuff of like, oh, like I did like these product hackathons, whatever. And look, that's great, but you're missing leadership experience. And I can't rewrite your resume for you because I don't know what to. I don't know what study like groups you are part of, but I can tell you that you're missing this. And then you come back to me with, hey, here are my fixes. Let's go back through it and make sure that people understand. And so knowing what you will do and what you won't do is like really helpful for other people to also have the right expectations. One of the open questions is, hey, say that someone is working with you. What if they want to apply to the company that you're currently working at, right? Like, where are your boundaries there? For me personally, like my own code of ethics is I don't help people apply to places where I'm working. Because like that's not fair. Like that's like some sort of like paid advantage. And so like that's off limits, right? My wife works at some company and I'm not going to help people to get into that company because that is also not fair. But everything else is fair game. Right? And so like being able to know those things up front of what are the things that I am comfortable doing? What are the things that I'm not comfortable doing? Is really important. Right? Like some people are much better at, hey, I don't want to do any of the resume stuff. Totally fine. Right? Some people can say, hey, I'm not going to do any of the on-the-job stuff. I'm only going to help you with the recruiters. Also totally. But like knowing what it is that you want to be able to offer people, like this is my value, is like one of the more important things. And so like all of this stuff makes it sound like, hey, like I know it all from the start. You don't, right? And so it's more about put it out there, you iterate. Right? First you put out like, hey, talk to me for free for 20 minutes. I don't even know what I'm going to charge. Let's like figure out what we're going to talk about. You need to do this maybe like, 3-4 times just to be able to start to see like, hey, people actually do want to talk to me. They actually do find my perspectives valuable. That's when you then start to draw the bounds. Here are the things that I'm good at. Here are the things I'm not good at. And here's the price point that makes sense.
So essentially, you're saying that when somebody is actually testing the waters and trying to get to it, the two big takeaways are: first, you kind of sample it, which is essentially maybe give them a 15 to 30-minute review where you'll talk through the problem they have, and then maybe offer a paid offering, right? Once you keep doing that, you'll know maybe certain things which people are paying you to do, and you'll know, okay, these are some of my core strengths. And what you're also saying is explicitly mention what you would do and what you would not do.
That's a very good point. I mean, a lot of these days, so we are seeing so many different types of product coaches again on LinkedIn and all that stuff, where like I think what we have seen is people like kind of struggle to make that call. Is this the right coach for me? Is this the right call for me to take? Because everything is so expensive. Like a course can typically take up to $1,000, $1,500, but they wouldn't know what even they would get out of it, right? So I think this kind of that hand holding maybe hand holding or tutoring like experience to start with, and giving them that experience what you would do in that shows is a great point that you brought up, I think, which a good takeaway for me too.
Awesome. Yeah, and so like let's imagine that I have maybe figured out 2 or 3 offerings which I might offer, which I'm good at, and also people are paying me for that. What is the next step which you do?
Yeah. So I think like once you figure out like, hey, this is what I'm good at, and I see that people are willing to pay me for it, it's just like getting it out there, right? So there are tons of platforms that you can use to make it happen. There's things like Super Peer. There's too many platforms for me to like know off the top of my head. There's so many out there. It's actually quite commoditized. And it's just like, hey, like, this is the place where you can find. You can even do something very simple like Calendly. Like, hey, here's Calendly to book like a free trial versus here's Calendly to like actually book my time for like our upcoming paid sessions or whatever. And then you just like get the ball rolling. Like you let people know, hey, like I can help. I think one of the things that is important is when you are sharing that, like, hey, like I can help with this stuff. You want to be as focused as you can of like, this is how I'm going to help you when you're sharing about it, rather than just saying like, hey, like I come to me for advice, right? I think like that is too vague and too unclear. And so what I mean by that is many times I'll see, in someone's LinkedIn head, will say, hey, like I'm like a product coach. And then in the bio, they're like, hey, like I'm a product coach. And then, every day they post on LinkedIn, hey, like I'm a product coach. And like I like do coaching. As like, that's not like thinking about the customer. What is it that they have a problem with? And so many times it's more like, hey, I recently helped this person, and like you need to get their permission to like be able to talk about it. Rather, I recently helped this person, or you need to let anonymize it, work through this particular problem. Here's how I did it. Here's how we did it together, and here was the outcome of us doing this together. In case this might be helpful for you, reach out to me. And like that way, like it's a very soft sell where people can see like, oh, okay, so he solved this problem before. I don't have this problem yet, so like, I'm not gonna call him. But as soon as they hit that problem, like, oh my God, who is the person that did this? Oh, right, it was Clement. Let's go talk to him more because I ran into that exact same problem. And so problems, for example, hey, I'm currently working on a really mature product, and now I need to go shut it off. Right? Like now I need to go tell all of our customers we're no longer doing this product. I've never done this before. It's super scary. What if my customers yell at me because now I'll be getting rid of the product that they're using? I was like, oh, like I have helped people sunset products before. Or like here is what I coached them through. Here's the experience that I went through. Here's what happened when someone did this with me. And people were like, oh, like he's clearly done it before. And so now that in that position, let's go find. On the flip side, hey, I'm not sunsetting the product. I'm trying to find 0 to 1 fit. And so then, because it's not going to match what I'm trying to do, I'm not going to go club. And like, good. That way we don't waste each other's time, right? And so, being able to share, this is how I help someone through that, is I think one of the more valuable ways of doing it, which goes back to like hey, like you want to actually do a couple of once for free early. So one of the things that I had as like a massive advantage is before I became like a paid product coach, I was basically coaching people for free for like all of these years as like my hobby. It was like very easy for me to have all these testimonials from the start. That, like I didn't have to even talk about it. People were like, hey, if you're trying to deal with this problem, Clement helped me through it. You should go talk to him. And like that was like super helpful. Of of course, I don't expect that other people who are getting started with coaching are going to have that kind of like long background of like free mentorship. And so it's say, when you put your name out there, you can say first, like, hey, I'm just getting my coaching business started. These are the things that I am good at. Because I'm just getting it started, the first 10 people who sign up, it's going to be, it's going to be free, not just like the initial 30 minutes. Like, I'm going to give you like free 2 hours of whatever. People come to you, they work through like, oh my God, that was incredible. And like, of course, the trade-off is you need to tell them up front, hey, because you're taking this for free, I'd love to get your feedback. And if that feedback is positive, I'd love to ask if we can do like a case study or estimate. And like, so that then starts to kick off that like cold start problem. So then that way you have proof points. I think one of the things I want to just make really clear is to draw on an earlier point. There are all these different coaches out there, right? And it's like, one of the questions is, how would you scale? How would you like dominate? And it's like, I think that's actually the wrong positioning, because there are different industries where it's winner take most. And that's like by necessity, it has to work that way because of scale. There are other industries where it is completely okay for it to be a very fragmented industry, and you don't need to quote unquote dominate. Like, you can be one of many different people as a kind of like portfolio in the place. And so like a really good example of this is real estate, right? A really good example of this is when you are trying to buy a house, not everyone buys their house from like the same agency, right? Like, not everyone buys like their houses from the same like real estate agent, because like it's so fragmented. And those people don't have the time to take over the market anyways. Like, it's just fundamentally doesn't scale in that way. Because ultimately you're trading your time and your expertise for their like compensation, right? And so that because of that, you don't have to be the number one, whatever, right? Like, some people are going to be, hey, I am a person who immigrated to some other place and I was able to build a career there. And for all the people who are immigrating, for all the people who have visa challenges, I got you. Like, I'm a US citizen, I cannot help. Right? So one of the things I make very clear in my coaching is, if you're trying to figure out how to find a PM job with H-1B visa or whatever, I will not help you with that, because I can't. Like, I haven't done it myself yet. And you're not going to get that much value from me. But here are the other people who can help you, right? Like, here are the other people who went through that journey. And so like they can help you. And so knowing what's it called? And so I think it's really important, again, going back, have a couple of those free sessions, be able to generate those testimonials, and then not feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not taking over the market. I think that's totally fine, right? Like, in real estate, just as an example, if you only take 1% of the transactions in like a given zip code, like, you can easily make 6 figures, potentially 7 figures, depending on what market you're in. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's like not even close to like 5%, not even close to 10%. 1% of transactions is more than enough just for commissions. And I think it's similarly fragmented in product management, right? There's so many kinds of product, right? There's like, of course, if you're standard like growth product management, you think about like, e-commerce, or you think about social media. But there's also like your B2B type of product management. There's like your platform product management. You could be coming from nonprofits, which is like a very underserved area, or like a government product management. You could be tackling these different geographies that are fundamentally different, right? And so there's so many ways to cut and slice and dice it, that I think it is nearly impossible for anyone to be able to 100% capture a given niche, because there's so many niches. And so it's more like, hey, because this is my identity, because this is the rapport that you will build with me as you're working through this challenge, right? I think that is more than enough. Right? So that's how I think about promotion. Is it's not like you need to flood social media. It's not like you need to get all of these paid ads. It's not like, oh, like I have to go, put myself into like everyone's newsletters or whatever. It's more like, let it organically happen, where the people who are drawn to you will naturally be drawn to you because you are you. I have some people who started coaching who are very shy, and they're like, hey, like, I'm really shy. I'm really introverted. I can't see why anyone would coach. Like, why anyone would come to me. I'm like, exactly, because you're shy, right? Like, you're shy, and like, you became a successful product manager on the job, right? And there are other shy PMs too, and they're like, how do I do any of this? Like, it's because you're shy that they will come to you, right? Like, you don't want to go up to the extroverted people because they don't resonate with you, right? And so it's just like all of these different things about like, hey, I'm a female, or hey, like, I am non-binary, or like, hey, like, I live in New York versus I live in Texas, or whatever. Like, there are all these different ways in which I identify and where you resonate a lot better. I think That's part of the reason why, even with blogs or even with like articles and essays, everyone's written about product. Everyone's written about nearly every single topic that is about product. Like, how did I become one? Right? Like, how do you tackle like, ticket estimation and story breakdowns? How do you deal with a stakeholder who's not happy? Everyone has written. But specifically, your experience and your voice and your identity going through it that decides whether someone's going to read all of it, whether they're going to skip like after reading the first 2 sentences, like, nah, that's not. And so, like, that's what I think about it is totally okay for a market to be quote unquote saturated and still be even more saturated, like how so many more people publish this. Because here's how I think about it. Coaching, writing, speaking, they are not commodities. Like, they're actually hyper specialized to the person who's delivering them, right? And so it's not like a commodity type thing where like you're undifferentiated versus everyone else. Like, you are the only person that could coach the way that you do. And there are people who would uniquely benefit from your style versus everyone else's style, right? And so you don't have to be like, oh, I'm not going to be able to beat Reforge. I'm not going to be able to beat products. I'm not going to be able to beat General Assembly. It's like, no, they've got their own instructors with their own stuff. And so the people who will go to them are who will go to them. But everyone who's going to them, right, they already know where to go. But everyone who's not going to them, they're lost. They're like, why is there not one for me? Rather, I don't want to do Reforge. I don't want to do General Assembly. I don't want to do product school. Why isn't there a coach for me? Well, you're that coach, right? And so I think there's like this like fear of, oh, well, there's all these incumbents and oh, there's all these coaches, right? Like, I think one of the things that will sound insane is like, even though I coach, I am not afraid of competition. Like, I want there to be more coaches because let me tell you what, like, the people who come to me, they get some benefit from me, great, and I really want them to benefit. But if they don't get the maximum value from me, there is someone else out there who's better than I am at it. I would prefer that they go there instead, right? Because that is ultimately better for the industry for all. And so, like, the people who will naturally come to me, they're going to come to me no matter what. And the people who like don't fit with me, they shouldn't come to me. And so I want more coaches out there to be able to handle those people, to be able to solve those people's pains in a much better way than I possibly am. And so I think that makes for a much more vibrant product management practice overall. And that means that we can all build better products, right? I think one of the things that like I've heard a lot is people are like, hey, I'm worried that AI is going to take over the industry and there'll be no more product managers ever. It's like, that's why coaching is so important, because let's show people we're not just AI chatbots. Like, we are actually navigating all these very human pains around solving customer pains, around understanding stakeholders, around like compromises, negotiations, like sequencing, prioritizing. We do all these things that a chatbot like an LLM can't possibly ever do. And so now more than ever is the time that we need coaches out there. So that's kind of.
And I have one follow-up question on that. Like, I know this, as you said, there's so many people out there, and competition is continually going to be there. But just like if as a product coach or a product coaching business, how do you continue to upskill yourself? How do you continue to keep updated with the latest like information and all while you're doing a full-time job? Because this is like another full-time job altogether.
Yeah, great question. So there are a couple of different ways that you can do this, right? So I think one of the really nice things about product coaching is you can decide to make it full-time, but you can also decide to just leave it be part-time, right? Like, you hold down a full-time job while you're coaching. And it's so unique that you can do that, because it's honestly very hard to do part-time product management. It's honestly like incredibly tough. Well, part-time coaching is very straightforward, right? And so I would think of it as more like a spectrum of like, how much do I want to go do? And so I would say the place that I would generally recommend someone who's trying to start, like, hey, I want to start to coach first, is you're probably already a PM. You should hold on to that role. And you just do like maybe like 1 or 2 hours per month or 1 or 2 hours per week. Don't do more than that in terms of being the coach. And that way you're just learning on the job, or like anything that you touch on the job, or like you're already learning from it anyways. And then that way you can bring that into, hey, by the way, I recently just had this particular challenge. I've seen how this particular thing plays out. Here's my experiences. Here's how it will. And so like that then very naturally upskills you, because like you will just have encountered the same kinds of challenges on the job. Like, that's like a very natural. If you do decide to do coaching full time, I think one of the things that you'll actually see is that you'll be working with so many people all at once, right? Like, in a single day, you might work with 6 people, might work with 8 people, that you're getting all of these diverse experiences together. And so then that itself is already a form of upskill. You have to, oh, this person needs to navigate this nonprofit situation this way. and this person needs to navigate this uncooperative manager that way, but this person needs to do it like this kind of sort of this way. I'd learned all this by osmosis, by just simply being, where I taught them one part, but they taught me another part, and they're the ones paying me. Like, that's like an awesome place to be at, right? And so you're absorbing all of this stuff and have already learning all to upscale, right? I think one of the things that can be helpful is there are, of course, kind of different, and there are all these different resources out there. I would say any resource that you would take to become a better PM on the job is the same resource that you would take to be like a better coach. Because like the better you are being a product manager, the better you are at teaching people how to be product managers. And so I would say, like, if you're already reading, like, let's say First Round Review or like Harvard Business, you should just do that. You don't need to stop that. If you are already, if there are particular like podcasts you're already listening to, like learn about product management or learn about technology, you should just continue to listen to those. And so I think it's like really not that big of a shift. Like, I have not changed the kinds of content that I'm pulling in to then create like new kinds of content or guidance, etc. It's just kind of all been the same stream, whether that has been as a part-time coach or as a full-time coach. So I think it's actually not that big of a difference. I think one of the things that people love to use as an excuse is, hey, I don't want to be a coach yet because I don't have the right resources to do it. And so like until someone tells me these are the books that I should read, I'm not going to do it. And it's like, you're thinking about it wrong. You should just go do it. And then once you've done it, you will naturally figure out, oh, well, like I need this book on psychology. Great, we'll read that. Oh, like I need this book on negotiating salary. Great, like go buy that. Right? Like you will just like get exposed to it. And then so I would say spend less time preparing and spend more time doing, and that is a much faster way to lose.
Essentially, you're saying get started, right? It's a powerful statement which you brought up before, right? So a lot of people don't get into product coaching because they think, okay, there are these big enterprises who are already doing it, and there's also product school and all of them. I think it's winner take all. There's no space for me, but I think it's very powerful to think that there is always a unique value which you bring, and there's also a niche who wants value out of you. So it's a powerful combination where you can actually offer this to people, and even though if it's fragmented, right? And product management is also very diverse, where you have like a lot of different it changes by the state of the product, the type of the industry, the size of the company. So many different things can be solved in product. So essentially you can go in and pick your niche and then start your product coaching business. So I want to also ask about, right? So if I'm okay, if I've started doing this and all of that, and how would the business model work like, and what do you expect? Could you expect on the revenues, and what are the different types of revenue streams you can have, if you can share that information?
Great. So just in terms of like, how do you even think about like price points to begin with? Because I think a lot of times people are not really sure, like, oh, like, what should I be doing here? One of the things that I think is actually a really helpful rule of thumb, just based on the research that I've, is if you think about like the current pay that you have at work, you can basically break that down into almost like a per hour equivalent. And so typically it's something like, you divide by 2,000 for like your annual compensation, because the way that works is like, you work 40 hours per week. There are 50 weeks in a year, right? So 40 times 50 is 2,000. And so then you use money. And then that number, you then need to multiply by 3. And it's like, well, wait, hold on. Why am I multiplying by 3? Right? Like, I'm not worth like 3 times more off the job than on the job, right? But just from a sustainability perspective, generally speaking, especially if you go and like you're looking for customers, generally for every 2 hours that you're looking for someone, you'll spend 1 hour of that doing paid coaching. And so like, again, I mentioned, because you're going to be giving these free samples, because maybe you're going to be doing all of this like marketing and you're going to be doing content and whatever, all of that takes significant time. And so generally to be able to have the time balance out correctly for balancing between your on the job work, where like you're like a full-time PM, and then like you're like off the job stuff as a coach, you're generally going to multiply by 3 in terms of like your hourly. Of course, you can dial that up and down, right? And so if you want to prioritize your full-time work over your side hustle, then you would charge your side hustle amount slightly less, right? And you charge less because then that way you focus more on like your work, right? It's like, oh, look, I'm not going to take on more customers because it actually pays me less well. And so you're more prioritized. If instead you're like, hey, I'm actually planning on not being here in the long run anymore, then you would charge more. And the reason why you would do that, right, is that, hey, instead of staying, an extra 3 hours per week at work, which is again like not paid because for product managers not paid hourly, we're usually paid yearly. Then if you charge more, then naturally you will want to prioritize doing that kind of coaching work over like the day-to-day work. And so generally speaking, I would say, so that is like the rationale from you, the supply side, in terms of where you would price your time, which doesn't speak at all to like the demand side. Like there's like a totally different thing of like, are people willing to pay for it? But just in terms of like being able to sustain it from your own side and like, how does that change your own motivation? That's how I think. And so there's that component. And so one of the things is, say that you are like, say that you are doing again, like, hey, I want to coach for maybe 6 hours per week, but I'm going to maintain like a 40-hour work week or like 50-hour work. Then like that would generally be like, oh, look, I'm going to charge like 3 times more because that makes sense. If it's like, hey, actually, I'm only just going to work the bare minimum 40 on the job. And then like now I want to stuff in an extra 20 or 30 hours of coaching per week, then you probably want to charge more for that. And if you're like, hey, like I'm just doing this for a lark, I'm only going to be doing this maybe 1 hour per month, 2 hours per month, then you actually want to charge less. And the weird thing is, and this will sound insane, if you price too low, people will actually have a lot of questions about like should I even work, right? So like especially in the United States, like if you're like, hey, like I'm gonna price myself at $15 an hour, right? People are gonna say like, what? Like I could get a math tutor for high school for like $30 an hour, $45 an hour, and you are a specialized product manager. You're working with technology and AI and scientists and like engineers. How could you possibly be worth less than a math tutor? I'm not gonna work with you. Like, and so it's actually really crazy of like you actually create fear and anxiety in your potential customers when you charge too low and you think like, oh, like I want to make it easy. It's like, no, you're making it harder for them. Like, and so generally multiplying by 3 is generally correct because that is what people are kind of already expecting. And so if you're like way off base from that, people would be like, what's wrong with this person? Or they're like not good enough, right? It's like it's almost kind of like it's kind of like when people think about like purchasing like luxury items like cars or like buying purses or watches. Is if it's
value, right? You have the value based on the price, right?
exactly. It's like price-based value is very real, unfortunately. And so you don't want to underprice yourself too much. Of course, on the flip side, there's a totally big difference between your stated price and the price that your customer ultimately decides to work with, right? And so I think one of the things that people say is, hey, I'm going to stick this price up and then I'm like locked at that price forever. And like, what if I want to help someone who like can't pay that? Right? What if someone comes to me and I actually really want to like help them and I'm okay making something. I was like, great, like go do that after the fact. Like just because you're like, hey, this is the list price, that doesn't mean that you can't work with them. Say, hey, I'd like to change this. And so, hey, let's say that there's someone who is a very close friend of yours and they're looking for coaching. Like, I don't feel good charging them that much. Don't. Rather be like, hey, like you're my friend and like normally I would charge this much. And like I know that right now, like you recently got laid off, like you're struggling through it. I'm gonna only charge this amount instead. Like, don't worry about it. Right. And great, like you do that. And so you need to know what your market facing price is, but you can adjust that person by person. Right. And so let's say someone comes to you and they're like, hey, I actually really want to work with you a lot. And the problem is that like your current price point makes it really hard for me to work with you a lot. It's like, okay, like let's change your words. Like, hey, if you commit to working with me, 3 times per week, 1 hour each, then I'll give you a bulk discount, right? And then like you can like do that, right? And so I think it's more important to say, hey, here's my public facing price point. And then once you do the intake with them, you can decide, hey, what is that willingness to pay? Right? Like how much are they going to be working with me? Do I want to give them more of like a bulk thing, or do I want to do something more bespoke for them or whatever? And you can do all of that to then kind of like adjust the pricing based on the person that you're serving and based on your own motivations to that. There was actually one time I was working with someone who was actually struggling through a lot of challenges, just like financially and like on the job, etc. And so I said, hey, like, I am okay, thinking of this almost like kind of like, for me, I was okay writing that off and saying, hey, like, I'm going to help you essentially for free in a way. Hey, don't me, I'm just gonna help, but like I can only meet with you this much per month because I need to write as the time elsewhere. And one of the things that happened is like they were able to secure like a role. And they're like, hey, like you helped me so much. I don't feel good about not giving to you, and I couldn't give to you back then, but now I am being paid, right? Like, can I give you a portion of my current income that I have now to make up for, hey, like you helped me all this time? Okay, like I think that makes sense. So you can structure it that way too. Like, hey, I'm not going to take anything from you, but once you get your job that first year, I'll take. Is it like 4% of your salary? Is it like 6%? Whatever it is, you go figure it out with your cost. And like so, there's so much more flexibility, I think, than what people would imagine. But for me, the way that I think about it is very much, hey, this is my market value. If I were like a full-time PM, and so then let's go ahead, let's take that market price, turn it into by hour, multiply it by 3. That's the public facing price, and then we can negotiate based on that person and based on how much I want. And like I work with folks who are minorities who have had not the ability to pay. I'm like, you know what? Because of the situation that you're in, I will give you a special price. Because I want to support you, right? Like I'm just thinking of it as like I'm going to subsidize your coaching through my own pocket because I think it's worth having more people like you, successful product managers, rather than only looking at willingness to pay at maximum profits. And like you can do that as a coach. Like you can decide whether you want your coaching to be more, hey, I'm going to profit maximize. Great, go for it. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But like, hey, I actually want to use my coaching as a platform for social. And so like I'm going to decide who's going to actually get like accelerated like discounted rates. Great, you go do that. And like that is all under your control because like it's your business. Like you get to decide what you want to do with it. And that's like an incredible amount of freedom that you get that I think is a very rare elsewhere.
Yeah. Thanks for laying that out. I know a lot of people actually struggle and don't know what to do and how to price all of this. And there's, I think, nothing online to even help or coach this because you have been there and done this many times. A lot of this would help people, anybody who wants to at least get into this business and start pricing stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to switch gears. I know we're a little over time. I want to switch gears slightly. How is AI changing this whole product coaching? I know previously it was probably a little easy, very hard. With they coming with own like their probably expertise, experiences, putting all together. But with AI, there's a lot of people who are not even product experts are kind of leveraging that and coming like, oh, I just want DK perspective there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll talk about the good and the bad, I guess, and then like we can kind of like sort through it as you pick. And so the places where AI is actually really helpful for product coaching is one of the things that you can do is when you're like, hey, I'm working with a new kind of customer for the first time. Maybe they're coming from a new industry. Maybe they're coming from a new background. Like, hey, like they're like an English major. They're not like a math major. I'm a math major. Whatever. You can actually simulate that ahead of time. They're like, hey, LLM, you role play as this person with this background, right? Like, let's go through. Like, these are the questions that they said that they want to ask me on me. Or like, how would I break in or how would I promote or whatever. And you can role play that before you ever meet that person, right? And like, that is incredible for you to have had a simulation. So then that way you feel way more comfortable working with that person once they actually walk in, right? And so that is incredible sometimes because, they might be in really weird situations that you have yet. I was like, oh, I'm not sure that I can do that. But then as you go through that really weird situation, you find out the details follow. And actually, you already have the existing framework. You have the experience to talk to it. Great. Then go take. On the flip side, feel like, hey, I'm going to go through the simulation that I don't think I can actually hold. You can tell them, like, hey, by the way, I thought about it more. Unfortunately, I'm not the right person for you. You want to talk to these other people instead. And that's totally fine. So AI is incredible for coaches to be able to prepare for upcoming sessions because you can actually go work through all of that. It's also incredibly helpful for you to be able to target your expertise, right? So transparently, my core strength is in B2B SaaS, right? Like I have been a B2B SaaS PM my whole career. A lot of people come to me with B2C type questions around how would I A/B test, how would I experiment, how would I grow? And I can translate a lot of that natively myself, but sometimes it's helpful to go through the exercise. Okay, how would I translate this framework? Because they don't only work with 2 customers, they work with 15,000. They work with this many. How would I treat this thing? And so that you can kind of bounce that back, find your own things also beforehand, right? So that's kind of like the the bad is, uh, a lot of people who don't actually know what they're doing, like they're not actually PM coaches, they will go and they will say, hey, like I'm going to use AI, I'm going to be able to answer your questions or whatever. And like, they just have like an LLM up, like transcribing from, like they're saying PS or like, they're on their vlogs, like putting out all this buzzword SEO stuff that isn't like actually helpful, right? And so that is not amazing. I have seen, and I'm not going to name names, I have seen quite a few places where the thing that they sell is coaching. And so they put out all of these things of like, how do I become a product manager? Should I get an MBA? How would I like work with engineers? And like it's so clearly generated. It's just like, it's clearly not based off of lived experience. I was like,
Yes. And especially, right, I've seen people who are not product managers coaching about how to become a product manager. And I've also seen posts where they even ignore to take out that chat GPT responding to them, right? So terrible, so bad, right? So I think, yeah, you're very right.
Yeah. And so I think what's interesting is you start to see it as you see this almost like bimodal type thing of like, there's a bunch of terrible stuff, which makes the good stuff even more rare and makes it even more important that we do it the right way. And so the way that I think about it is like, how like on your phone, like, when you're like texting someone, like there's like an autocorrect, and like, how like you can like keep pushing that to like generate like a sentence, and like that sentence makes no sense. The way that I think about it is like, if you can use autocorrect. There's absolutely nothing wrong with autocorrect, and like in fact, it helps you to not say something dumb to like your loved one. But if all you ever used was autocorrect and you never came up with your own words, right, and you just like always push like the beautiful suggestion on your iPhone, then like you would be a robot, and like no one would talk to you, no one wants to hang out with you. Right. And so similarly, there is absolutely nothing wrong with using AI on being a product coach, as long as it is not your final output. Right? Like it can help you prepare. It can help you think about, this is the kind of stuff I want to write about, but it should never be the sole input. You need to be a part of it. Like the way I can,
The starting point.
yeah, it's a starting point. It's like basically an army of high school interns, but like they are very eager to get you a bunch of stuff and they don't know what they're talking about. And so you have to come in as the expert and like guide them through that and fix it. Right? And so it's like, hey, the way I think about it is, it's kind of like, instead of just having like a keyboard, right? So I think a lot of times when people think about AI, they're like, oh my God, this omniscient like deity coming down, and like, here's gonna change it. No. The way to think about it is, AI is kind of like switching from using pen and paper to keyboards, right? Like when you went from pen and paper to keyboards, and was like, oh my God, like you lost all this craft of like writing like really nice letters. I'm like, hey, you miss all this like handwriting stuff or whatever. But ultimately, the best authors today of like books and like, movies and like any manuscript, anything, right? Like no one does it on pen and paper anymore, because like that's not actually like the vertical, that's not the vector that matters. But like the way that you're like handwriting, outside of like you like being like a calligraphy person, right? Like it's like not a big deal. And so the way I think about it is like, okay, well now you have a keyboard, and that keyboard is now multiplied by 10,000 times. And like there's all of these like machines that are typing all these things on these keyboards, like it gives you all this stuff, but you still have to like control it. Like you still have to like hit that. You still have to be the one that like weaves it together to be, this is the thing. And so that's how I think about it is, you would never go and say, hey, I'm not going to use a keyboard when I'm using pen and paper. I think you do need to go and switch to, hey, where are the places where AI can help? And so you shouldn't fear it, but you also shouldn't let it take over. Right? You shouldn't be like, hey, this is my final output, I'm not going to think about it. It's like, hey, does this reflect my voice? Does this reflect my experience? Is it hallucinating? Is this act? And so you still owe that editorial control to your use of AI, especially if you're going to be a coach, because it's not just about like, hey, like I want to, the thing about coaching is that like someone else is putting their career into your hands. And so like it is super important ethically to make sure that you are ready to actually help them make that career work, right? And so if you're just out there like, oh, I just want to make a quick buck and I'm just going to do it like AI, whatever, you should be doing it. Right? It's just not the right thing for you to do, because there's so much on that person's line. They are trying to move their family's health. They're trying to start a family. They're trying to, take good care of their kids, their parents, right? And so if you screw up their career, that's on you, right? That's like kind of how I think about that. But yeah, one of the things I do want to say, I want to make it really clear, is there are actually like these AI powered virtual coaches. And so it's like, oh, like, I'm a PM. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to type my question into like LLMs and solve. And I've seen quite a few startups try to start in that direction. Ultimately, most of them shudder. And the reason is because AI has not lived that experience. They have not gone and tried to deal with the specific customer you're dealing with their specific personalities and their specific traumas and their specific history to like work through like an integration or like work through like launch. It doesn't give you all this stuff, but it's not alive. Like it's not like this is my experience. This is my voice. And so I think, people should not fear that, PMs are going and asking LLMs questions, because what they will find is that at some point they're like, okay, but I actually just really need a person who's already done it. And the more that they talk to an AI, the faster they're going to hit the point. Okay, that's great, but I need a person who actually did it. Right. And so I think actually like AI generates more demand for coaching rather than diminishes demand, because it's like, hey, now that I've gotten all of these low value questions out of the way, I now find that I still cannot get the answer that I'm looking for. I still don't have the expert guidance, and my willingness to pay has gone through the roof, because clearly I have gone and checked the market, right? Clearly I've gone and I've got all the free advice, and none of the free advice solves the problem for me. Now I know I need to pay. And so I would not fear AI, right? Like AI as a coach can only help you if you're gonna be ethical about it, right? I was like the way that's
Yeah, and I also put it in this way, right? So if you're doing a task, AI will help you get to that 0 to 50% faster than before. But that last, or 0 to 80%, but the last 20% is where you are coming in, right? So essentially, it's like a sparring partner or an intern for you, where you are, if you have to write a product, PRD, it'll help you brainstorm the PRD, but it's not giving you the final version of the PRD, right? So you can't keep it in hand. The same way coaching, right? You can't keep the advice which AI is giving. uh, you know Ultimately AI decided, but it'll help you assist to get to that spot in assisting others, essentially, right? Awesome. Yeah, I know this is a very hot topic, but yeah, thanks a lot, Clement, for going through all of the information, right? And I think this is something that has been never covered in a lot of different places, so it'll be a good starting point for people who wants to start get into product coaching and learn how they can basically price some of the stuff and what they can offer and all of that. So essentially, if people want to reach you, right? So where can people find you? And also, do you have a website where you can talk, where you talk about product teacher?
Yeah. So everyone can always find me on LinkedIn, right? So Clement Kao, Clement, last name Kao. I think I'm the only there. And then the website is productteacher.com. It's just like, it's the two words together. There's no hyphens, right? So it's the product teacher, what's in word.com. And that's where you can find me there. And yeah, I think honestly, one of the things that I kind of, if I were to prophesy the future, right, as I were to look ahead, I spent all of this time being a PM and then helping other people become PMs for free. And I became like, I'm going to now be like a coach for PMs. I expect someday, maybe the next 5 years, as I'm helping people become coaches for free, at some point, people will be like, why don't you just do this for your job? I'll be like a coach, right? But the thing that's so okay for like, how do I launch this business? Like, here's how you, because I'm reading before. So I see that potentially happen. And so definitely don't hesitate to reach out if you're thinking about, hey, look, I want to start my own ability to coach. I think it is, again, there's so many people with so many valuable specific experiences to themselves that are just not well represented in kind of your like standard offerings, right? Like there's so many different standard providers out there, which is great. They should be there, but there should also be this very diverse, purposefully very fractured, very segmented market where there's all these small niches where each of these different coaches can come in out like their one thing, right? It is very much not like a zero-sum game, right? Like there are definitely people where I help to coach them on like, here's how you do this stuff like on the job. But before you got that job, the offer negotiations, right? Like here's like a different person. Offer negotiations. Like, like that person, I did offer negotiations with them. They have the job now. And now they're not feeling so good about it. Like you come in, like you help them see it. Right. So like it's like very like we are not playing for the same piece of pie. Like we're solving different people's different kinds of concerns. And the great thing is the more that you can help someone succeed, the more value they create on their jobs, the more that they make, and the more problems that they get from the employers. And once they have more problems, that's like, oh, well, now I have more ability to pay, right? And like now I have more problems that I can't solve myself. They will then get more coaches, right? And so it's like it kind of like snowballs that way.
Yeah.
And so that's why I very much am not afraid of like quote unquote competition. I don't see competition. All I see is there's a wide open space. There are so many PMs who still need help. I cannot get to all of them as much as I want to get to all of them. If you can help them, please come into the space, right? It's like really kind of my call to action for everybody.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks a lot for all of those insights, Clement, and thanks for your time and being on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Manish.